Hi, Andrew from Sachs, and welcome to video number 6 in our 9-video sequence on stakeholder management. This one's all about the neuroscience of influence, and we're going to be talking about a thing called the old brain and new brain divide, which is a sort of a simplification, but a true simplification about the way the human brain works. For those of you who've read the wonderful book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, you'll know that he talks about it as System 1, System 2, but it's the same thing. Old brain, new brain, System 1, System 2. The important differentiation between the key functions of the human brain. The old brain is the older part of the brain, the first bit to evolve, if you want to put it that way. The new brain is the outer part of the brain. Now, this is an important differentiation because it turns out that the older part of the brain is responsible for the more basic functions of the human body. So, for instance, things like digestion, running your heart, but also things like the fight, flight, and freeze response, which were all about protecting the organism. That's in the old brain. The new brain evolved in order for us to be much more social animals, to be firstly hunter-gatherers and then to live in societies and cities and all of those sorts of things. The new brain has evolved. The interesting thing about it is that the various parts of the human brain really don't communicate that well with each other. And so you see therapies in psychology where you actually identify different parts of a person's personality and you seek to reconcile them in order for the person to become more integrated. That's a really common technique these days in psychotherapy. And so what we find is that in stakeholder interactions we get the same thing. Now, the key elements of the old brain are things like defensiveness, being good at quick and simple tasks, being resistant to change, focus on the past, and tends to be associated with emotions such as anger, fear, and depression. And the anger, fear, and depression really comes from the fight, flight, and freeze response. So anger, of course, is the fight response, fear is the flight response, and depression is the freeze response. And what's going on there is that the person's defensiveness against new things can cause them to retreat into themselves or to fight back or to simply flee from you. The new brain is all about collaboration. It tends to be creative, as Daniel Kahneman demonstrated in Thinking Fast and Slow. It can be expensive and slow to run. And that's why probably 70% of our interactions are actually old brain interactions, automatic interactions, kind of like a comfortable old cardigan, or anger, fear, and depression. Now, the old brain is a way of responding to things intuitively and quickly. The new brain is much more thoughtful. And in many ways, success in organizations is about being more a new brain organization than an old brain organization. But if you need a stakeholder to do something new, there's no way you can do it without engaging their new brain. Messaging can have a big effect on what's turned on in the person's brain, the old brain or the new brain. I don't know if you know this, but the human brain really does not, as a whole, speed up or slow down very much. So what that means is that if you turn on one part of the brain, it tends to turn off other parts of the brain. Think of it as a closed system. So if energy is needed to run one part, it tends to be drawn from somewhere else. And that's why you get things like road rage. Because what's happened is that the amygdala turns on and the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain, flares up. And the thinking part of the brain, which is one of the most expensive parts to run, is in effect turned off because all of the energy drains down to the amygdala. And that's how you get phenomena such as road rage, where later on people will look back on what they've done and it's almost like it was done by a different person. But the good news is that you can use this in a positive sense as well. So if somebody's very angry, of course you've got to listen to them, but the moment you can get them to think about what's the outcome that you're seeking to achieve, that will turn on the new brain and it makes it very difficult to be angry because the new brain consumes so much energy, it sort of turns off the old brain. This is a technique that's often used in anger management these days. In stakeholder interactions, old brain and new brain can both be potentially useful. So old brain messages will typically be messages targeting the amygdala. And they might be things like, you can avoid this harm by doing X, Y, and Z. Now we know in the world, there's all kinds of old brain messages which are actually effective. Things like, if you smoke, you will get diseases. You know, that's a classic old brain message. And old brain messages tend to work for very simple messages like don't smoke, don't drink and drive. Those kinds of things can be very effective. Now, we know that if you're going to use old brain messages, people can be habituated to them quite quickly. So you can't use them forever. And you can use them only for simple things. And that's why, for instance, here in Australia, we've had this campaign for years about not drink driving and showing the effects of things like tobacco, disease and all of those sorts of things. And what they find is that for those to work, you kind of have to rotate the horrors. If you use the same horror for too long, people become habituated to it. But again, it works for only very simple messages. A new brain message might be something along the lines of, hey, imagine a future without cancer. Imagine a future where we all get along. Imagine a future where this happens. So what that's doing is that it's appealing to a new brain, future-based kind of a concept, or causing you to be able to understand and think about a destination which is a really desirable thing to move towards. Now, I think that good stakeholder management should largely be new brain messaging. So rather than focusing on problems, focus on solutions. And earlier videos, I talked about the balance of good and bad and positive and negative, and how you really need to build a strong relationship. You need way more positive interactions than negative interactions. So yes, there may be times when you'll say, okay, you can avoid this risk, and that can be a really powerful motivator. But in general, what we'd be doing is try to understand and build a joint destination with your stakeholders, something to move towards that will cause you both to be able to collaborate. In the next video in this sequence, we'll be talking about the work of Gary Uckel into the styles of interactions that people use to try to persuade people to do things. Click on the link near this video to understand how you can use the work of Gary Uckel to make your stakeholder interactions more informed.